Hey guys, Darren Carr here, coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome back to another episode of the Club Preview Series. On today's episode, we are talking about the Fremantle Dockers. Let's get into it. And that's the Fremantle Dockers. They're back with a big vengeance for 2025. After finishing 10th last year in 2024, just missing out on finals after being in the finals for a majority of the season. I think they were top 4 for probably the first half of 2024. So would have hurt a lot of Freo fans to see them not make finals at the end of the day, but they're back and they're going to be pushing up the ladder for 2025. Which is pretty much one of the guarantees I think we're going to get next year. They had a pretty good off-season. They picked up Shai Bolton, who they obviously targeted, probably was on their list for the past couple of years. So he slots straight into their best 22. I expect him to make a big influence on their team and really complement what they're trying to build. Looking and diving into all the stats that I've seen, they're really trying to generate this sort of handball receive sort of game style, which we've seen from Richmond in the past, where they just use their handballs to really push the ball forward and use their speed and agility to really get the ball forward and kick goals. And I think they've really got that in their list, where they've got a really good balance of speed and agility, but then also have a lot of veterans in there to really stable some heads when the young guys, the young midfield as such, are struggling potentially. So I really like what Freo have been doing, and I really think they're on the right path in the way that they're going forward. So big things I expect from them in the coming year. But in terms of fantasy, they are pretty much a pretty big powerhouse in my opinion. It doesn't take too long to really think of big names in their side. You're talking to Brayshaw, you're talking to Serong, you're talking to Luke Ryan. All three of them are in the top 25 of players in the fantasy wise. So they're absolute powerhouses in each of their lines. But then you're also not looking too far down, where you're looking at a couple of Ruckman, Sean Darcy, and Luke Jackson. And then you got a few other superstars that we had last year, and like a Hayden Young or even a Jordan Clark also popped up last year, who turned out to be a really good selection for us. Even a Jeremy Sharp, he was great for us last year. So I'm pretty confident that someone else will jump up for us in this season to come. So let's get into some players that I'm really keen on in 2025. Just quickly, I'll rattle off what they did in the off-season. Pretty much, it was just Shai Bolton they traded in from Richmond. Besides that, picked up Quinn Narkle in the selection period. I can't exactly remember the name of that, but I don't think he's too much to worry about. I think he'll just be depth of anything. Has shown some potential, but couldn't get it done at Geelong, couldn't get it done at Port, so I don't think he's going to have much luck at Fremantle either. In terms of their outs, they didn't really trade anyone out, so that probably shows you their direction and where they're going. So no one really wants out. They were really buying into this picture of that they're going to be competitive next year and they're going to be pushing finals. And besides that, they really had a bunch of delistings just to fill out a few different spots here and there. So no one really to mention there. Besides that, they went to the draft with pick 17 and picked up Murphy Reid, who we'll get into a little bit later, as someone that we need to keep an eye on. But the first player I really wanted to talk about, and it's probably no surprise, I'll start at the top, is Andy Brayshaw, if I can get this working. He has been a fantasy gun for us for a long time now, probably 3 or 4 years, I would say, where he sort of came to our senses, and yeah, he averaged over 100 there. So he is down this year at 104.6, where in the past 2 seasons he has averaged over 110. So you could probably say off the start that he is a bit of value, but like I said before, he is ranked number 21 overall, and he's ranked 13th in terms of midfielders. So he's sort of there and thereabouts in terms of on the midfield line, but he's still a fair way back and really needs to improve on that to jump up into the top 6 and top 8, that we really want in our sides. the way I've sort of evaluated why he's dropped his average is just purely due to his CBAs being down. So you could see, last year he was up close to 80% and he's dropped his average to 70. So it doesn't seem significant, but he has this really big correlation when he doesn't have the CBAs and he's not around the ball. He's not influencing and not getting as many touches. It probably sounds pretty obvious, but he really relies on those touches as much as a lot of other players do. So I don't know if I can see that jumping back up again. I think they've sort of gone past that pure reliance on this certain type of player. You could see just here, they were trying a few different things here and there in terms of like the early part of the season where he was dropped down to 50% here and there, even late in the season around 22. I don't think that's going to happen very often. That's just going to be a pure maybe we're not winning this game, or maybe the game isn't going the way that they want and they've got to change a few things up in midfield. It's okay. Who needs to be moved out? And that seems to be Andy Brayshaw that gets the bit of the nod to try something different. Maybe he's a bit more damaging elsewhere, whereas Caleb Serong is probably just seen as that pure midfielder and probably a bit cleaner in terms of his distribution. So I think that's where Caleb Serong probably gets the nod over Brayshaw at the moment. But if Brayshaw can get back to his 2023 ways, he is someone we absolutely need to keep an eye on. I do back him to probably improve on his average from last year. Oh, this year, sorry. I keep saying last year, this year. As of recording, this is the 29th of December, so I'm already in next year. But in 2024, in 2025, I do expect him to improve his average. Probably closer to 108 sort of range. I do think with them winning more and potentially having more ball going forward, that he will potentially kick more goals and do that sort of thing. So he is one that I'm highly considering paying up for, just because the other thing that I really like about Fremantle, no opening round, so obviously no elite buys, and they also have the really good buy in round 13. Now, I haven't spoken too much about the mid-season buys so far, but they're not going to be as difficult as they have been in the past, given that we're not going to be having these massive rounds where we have 6 teams off the bye. I believe there's only going to be 4 on each bye now, and there's still going to be that round 13, which only has 2 teams. And Fremantle fall into that category, so they still technically have the best bye, but it's probably not going to be too much of an influence, I don't think, this season, given the buys are spread out by an extra round, and obviously we'll have more cover in those sort of areas. So we won't need to really force these guys into our team where we have in the past. But I still like to consider it, and I still like to just, in my mentality of way I'm thinking, that's how I've always played the game. So I will continue that until I'm proven otherwise. The next person, obviously his teammate in Caleb Serong, he obviously came through the ranks in 2023, coming into this full-time midfield role, and he's just taken it on, and he's become a fantasy gun for us. He's down from his 108 average from last season back to 104-ish, and again, I just think that that's purely based on kick-to-handle ratio. You can see that through all the stats, pretty much consistently all through Fremantle players, where their kick-to-handle ratio is down. And obviously kick-to-handle ratio isn't massive individually players, but when it is across the entire team, obviously that's 1 point per player. And then you're not also getting the marks that you'd get elsewhere. Like obviously kicking, you get the mark if it's over 15 meters, whereas handballs, you don't get nothing. So it can make a big difference when it comes to a whole team doing the same thing. So that's where I just see that both Andy Brayshaw and Serong have dropped. And if this is the way that they're going to continue to play, and it's the way I do think it's going to go with the recruitments they had and the style that they're trying to play, they're going to continue to handball, and that's probably not going to lead them to be scoring the absolute most that they could, but they're still going to be very competitive and still be very good picks that we could consider for 2025. You don't really need to look too far. 161 as his max score. He is a fantasy gun, and he is super consistent in that midfield. What was it? He went super big early on in the season. That was when he had his first score, the 161 in round 1 last season. So he got off to a fly, and he was looking really good for most of that part of the first part of the season, where not many people had him. I think I bought him in, straight after his bye, and that's when he turned into a bit of a stinker. So if you're banking that he's going to be this first half Serong, then he's probably potentially some value. I do expect him to probably improve on his 104 as well. Maybe not as massively as what you'd expect maybe a Brayshaw to do. I think Brayshaw probably has a bit more of a fantasy game to him than a Serong. So I probably expect him maybe to jump up to 106, if that at most. It's not much, and probably not one I'm considering at all to start off with. I think he's just that pure inside mid and probably not too much value. But he'll be there or thereabouts in terms of being that top 8 midfielder, and he'll always be in sort of that top 25, 30 in fantasy scorers. So he is one that you definitely have to keep an eye on, especially if the likes of, a Brayshaw goes down, or either Hayden Young is also in the midfield. If any of those sort of guys drop off, and that also means that Serong gets a bit of a bump, he's one that absolutely got to keep an eye on. The other powerhouse that we got to talk about is Luke Ryan. Now, he is a bit more interesting because he is much closer to being a top 6 defender. So he has the defender status, and currently he is ranked number 7 in terms of defensive players. Bit down on what he was last year, just given that we've had a few other players gain defender status. Zorko's back there now, and a couple others that we will get into a little bit later. But he is one that you got to keep an eye on just because of how good he can be. We've seen big patches last year where he just went absolutely massive. He did improve on his average from last season, so he was at 99.4. He went up to 102.1. And we just saw that purely based off probably more kick-ins, I think. I think he took more of that responsibility with the likes of Hayden Young moving forward into the midfield. That just freed up a few more kick-ins for the likes of Luke Ryan, and I can even show you that here. He just absolutely racked up. He was by far the clearest in terms of kick-ins, with Jordan Clark not too far behind. Do we see a bit of a switch in that next season with Clark taking more kick-ins, obviously being that quicker defender, being that one that can slingshot them a bit more? I'd probably, if I was a coach of Fremantle, I'd probably lean that way. We've seen Richmond in the past not really use those bigger players. They've used, a Jaden Short or a Daniel Rioli to really get the ball moving using that penetrating kick, and I think Jordan Clark could definitely do that. So that's probably one of the bigger flags for me to start Luke Ryan. I don't think he's potentially value, and I don't know how consistent that role is going to be if they're going to continue this game style change. So I'm probably not in the camp that I'd want to start Luke Ryan, and I probably see him decreasing, especially if they're going to be winning more games and spending more time forward. And we've seen in the back half of last season where, he went in the middle part of the season where he went absolutely massive, and then the coach came out and said, we don't want to be playing this game where we're chipping around in the back line, and then he instantly declined after that, having, 4 or 5 games under 80. So that is not a good sign for him, and I don't think he's one that I'd be considering, but we have to talk about him because he is so close to being that top 6 defender role. Moving down the list again, I'll talk about Luke Jackson first because he is just in price order. He is next up. So he is priced at 78.6, and he was pretty common among fantasy teams last season because of Sean Darcy being out, and he had forward status, which he does again have this year. He's obviously the second ruckman for Freo, so he plays a lot of time forward. He's not getting this massive amount of time in the midfield, rucking. Only when Darcy is in. When Darcy is out, he gets his massive time, and you can see that here. Every time Sean Darcy is in, he just gets no time in the midfield, like 30-40% at most. Sort of this 60-40 split, and sometimes it's even worse, depending on who they have in the forward line, can be 80-20. So for that reason, I'm not super confident, but if Sean Darcy continues to have his injured ways, he's one you're absolutely going to consider, because when he has these games where he is solo ruck, he averages 84.7. So that's nearly 10 points of value right there. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. He averages 94 when he is solo ruck. So that's close to 20 points. So 15 points of value right there if you can continue to have this solo ruck role. So here's one that I'm going to keep a huge eye on. Sean Darcy, on the other hand, we'll slot straight back into him. He is priced at 77.8. I'll even show you that here. Sean Darcy. So he is well down on his average because he had so many games missed. He only played the 12 games this season. and a lot of them were injury affected. So you can even just see here, with the 2 games that he was injury affected, he would have averaged 84, but he is well down on that. Obviously, he came back from his last season where he was averaging 95, and we've seen big stints of him averaging that sort of 95 to 100. So he can be a big player if he gets his body right to be one that we could potentially start in 2025 if he's right. And from all the things I've heard, he is looking ready to go. He's preparing. He got prepared early last season where he took the last 3 games off to undergo surgery in his knee to really prepare himself for 2025. So he is a huge watch for me just to see how he goes in terms of his fitness, if he's going to continue this role. I think he does. I know he's probably not the most athletic sort of bloke that they sort of want to use in terms of their quick ball movement, but we've seen Nank do that in the past for Richmond, so I think he does a very similar job and can continue to be fantasy relevant for us. And I definitely think he provides value, but it is obviously just a huge risk in terms of injury. He hasn't played many games throughout his career. Like, he had a pretty good span 2-3 years ago now, but in the last 2 seasons, he really just hasn't been able to get on the park consistently. Like, if you look just at his scores this season, had probably 3 or 4 injuries throughout the season, and before just taking the last bit of the season off, preparing for this year. So for that reason, he is definitely on my watch list. He is below 800k, so you won't have to pay up for these $1.1 million ruckman. So that saved you 300k right there. So that could be put on top of another big player, and you're really reducing that gap, or even extending your gap, your points differential on everyone else. So big watch on him. Hopefully he can get his body right and can have a big 2025 and be fantasy relevant for us once again. The next one we want to talk about is the newcomer in Shai Bolton, and I've touched about on him a little bit, if I can spell his name. Shai Bolton. Shai, I don't know what exactly it is, but he is priced at 74 at 761k, and that's down based on what he was able to do at Richmond in 2023, so his best was at 87. So where do we see him playing? If you looked at the best 22 that I have up here, he's going to be playing a lot forward. I think that's sort of where he's going to slot in, but I do think he is going to have some midfield time. Don't get me wrong, I think it probably won't be as high as what he's seen at Richmond. I think it potentially is maybe like a 30% split, 30-70 sort of, so he's been 30% in the midfield and 70% forward, just because I think, when you look at their midfield line, it's already pretty stacked. You're talking Brayshaw, Serong, Hayden Young, and then you've got the likes of, Fife runs in there, Johnson's in there as well. If they want to throw in some X factor, Shai Bolton's probably the next person. They've thrown Frederick in there a little bit as well. So there's just a lot of names that are rolling through there, and I just don't think the points and the availability is there for him just to slot in without giving someone else a bump. So it's a bit of a wait and see where that sort of lands, but he's one you got to definitely watch. For now, he is potentially in my side, and if you've seen my team reveal, he is in my side so far. I just think he complements their game so quickly, and he's going to be one that they're going to heavily use. It's just that awkward position of, well, where does he get thrown deep forward, like what we saw at Richmond, where maybe he's not having the influence in the middle and he can just go forward. Because if you look at his numbers back at Richmond, if I bring them up, there's no real correlation to CBAs equals points. There was big portions of last year where he had some time in the CBAs and he just didn't show up at all. Like, I think this round 8, he had like 80% CBAs and he scored a 42. So he's not this person that relies purely on CBAs to get around the ball. He is purely just an impact player and can score massively when the game suits him. So that's what I want to see from him more. Can he be more consistent in terms of what he outputs and be that more of a, consistent scorer when the ball isn't right next to him as such. So, and he doesn't rely on kicking just bags to get these massive scores. So, for that, I just really like what he's able to do and what he brings to Fremantle, and I think that they will use him quite well, and I think he presents some value at what he's priced at currently and what his best has been. So for that reason, especially being a forward, I've thrown him in my team so far. Besides that, I've only got a couple other players that I want to touch on, and these are much cheaper guys, and that is Nathan O'Driscoll. So a lot of people have already flagged him that he is very, very cheap. So he is priced down at 43, so 441k, I believe. And he only played two games last year. So it was in his third year, didn't really make much of a standout, but I really think he's going to break out in 2025 and become this winger that we all know that he can be. Now, I'm not thinking he's going to be an absolute massive fantasy superstar. I think he's just going to be one that's very underpriced and can be very consistent for us as a wingman. We've seen Harris Sharp last season. He went absolutely ballistic when he was rookie priced. Well, not quite rookie priced. He was around that the higher priced rookies. But O'Driscoll's very similar. He's just over rookie price by 100k. So you can easily pay up for that, and he could probably be one that consistently scores well for us. If he breaks into the team and plays this wing role, I think he could probably average 65 to 70. We've seen in the past he's been able to do this sort of 60, so I think he can go to that next level and push closer to 70. And the AFL was even backing him into being that main main winger for Fremantle. So I think that's really good signs that he is going to do that. The probably where the spot opens up is if Jaeger O'Meara is playing in this side anymore. It seems like he's sort of on the outer of Fremantle. Whether he still finds a spot elsewhere, playing a bit more of a forward role. But really, that spot was Jaeger O'Meara's last season. So, where does it open up, and does that allow Nathan O'Driscoll come in? I think it probably does, and I'm really looking forward to what he's able to do. Just going based on what he scored last season when he played. If I go back to Fremantle scores, when he played his full game, he scored a 79, and I think that was the last game of the season. Yeah, so he played 2 games, and that was a 22 and a 79. Obviously, one was a bit of a sub score, and then he came into the side. So he is one that you absolutely got to keep an eye on, because he can be a gun and can be one that's going to produce a lot of value for us. The only problem I do find that he is a pure midfielder, so you will have to use one of those precious midfield spots on him. So we've already talked a lot about some of these midfield rookies that we are trying to pump into our side. So this is sort of just adds on top of that as well, so that makes it a bit tricky. But again, if he breaks into the side, he's going to be a consistent part of their 22, and he can absolutely provide plenty of value. So it's just whether you want to pay out that extra 100k for him or not. And the final person I want to talk about is rookie, and that is their pick 17 and Murphy Reid. Just wanted to quickly touch base on him. So he is priced at 291, and he is on my watch list because he is one that can absolutely score. He's one that they obviously targeted, Fremantle targeted in the draft, and they got him. But looking at his draft profile, if it wants to load, I've got back up. In 2024 for Vic Metro, he averaged 96 fantasy points across 4 games. So it really shows he's got plenty of talent, and even in the talent league, he's averaged 91 across 9 games. Sorry, that's not neat, but yeah. So he is this sort of mid-forward player, so I do think there's potentially a spot for him to slot into the side. It's just whether there's an opportunity for him. Obviously he won't take over Shai Bolton. Obviously Frederick's made his name now as well. I'm still not super convinced on Sam here. I still think there's an opportunity for him, and whether a Johnson drops out because of that midfield rotation isn't there for him. He's shown he's not quite as impactful when he doesn't have those role. Is a Nat Fife on the way out? Does he only play limited games this year? Corey Wagner, I think he's a bit of a dud. I don't think he's one that will continue to play on the side. And Sam Sturt has definitely got plenty of potential. And also they got more depth in terms of Michael Walters is another one that they can throw forward that really has shown what he's able to do, but probably the best is past him. So depends if they really go for this this youth and really try and pump games into these highly drafted draftees. So he's one I'm absolutely got to keep an eye on, because he can be anything if he gets games. So he's a bit on the outer in terms of, obviously, he's a midfield only. That's the only problem, but I do expect him to pick up forward status pretty quickly if he comes into the side. So big watch on him. Keep him on your list. And yeah, I think that sort of does it for Fremantle. If I missed anyone, please let me know. I can probably break it down in the comment section for you. But if you have any questions, please drop them down below. I'll do my best to answer them as we go through this series. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Catch ya. Bye.